here in Paris is Eric Chaney. He's AXA's chief economist. Eric, thank you for joining us on the show. Now, we have two opposing views. On the one hand, the U.S. warning Europe that if you cut too much, then growth will be down. We may also face a double-dip recession. Do you think certain European governments are cutting too much?
No, I don't think so. I think that you have to look at the big picture, the aggregate picture. The big picture is that global trade is already slowing down. So whatever the Europeans are doing, there will be a slowdown in the second half of the year as a consequence of the very strong recovery of global trade until now. Industrial production on a global basis is back to its early 2008 level. Now let's move to Europe. Not all countries are doing the same. If all the countries were cutting budget deficit by 2% of GDP, I would be really worried about the possibility of a double dip. But in reality, it's only peripheral countries which are cutting very deeply.
Germany. Germany's cutting.
No, Germany is doing only 0.5% of GDP in terms of spending cuts next year. The same as France. That is my point. If you look at the details where the devil is supposed to be hiding, actually, Spain, Greece, Italy to some extent are cutting deeply, not Germany and France, which are too cautious or which are reasonably cautious and want to spread spending cuts over 4 years. That's not the big shock that Nouriel Roubini is talking about.
So, Eric, does it mean that actually we won't see a double-dip recession in Europe? And do you believe Mr. Trichet when he says these cuts will actually show the markets that we're transparent and it will give them more confidence?
No, I tend to be on Trichet's side in this regard. The markets are really concerned by budget deficits, the unsustainability of fiscal policies in Europe. Markets are looking at pension reforms, all that sort of things. But I don't think that will be sufficient. I think there is a liquidity crisis right now. Spain has enormous difficulties to borrow, although Spain is a perfectly solvent economy. So we need first to solve the liquidity issue. And also, we need to deal with the Greek case. Greece is not solvent. The sooner there is a restructuring of the Greek debt, the better for Europe.
How do you deal with the liquidity crisis? Will these stress tests actually be enough to give the banks a little bit more breathing room to lend to each other again?
Well, transparency is a good thing. Until recently, European banks did not want to show the details of their books. And their hands was forced by Spain, which acted very smartly. Now, again, it's in the details that we will see whether the stress tests work or not. I personally think that the more transparent, the better. The stress test should really show what kind of government bonds European banks have in their books. And then the markets will take their view.
But Eric, it does seem that, for the last 3 decades, the U.S. consumer was boosting everyone. They were the ones consuming and buying our products and the emerging market products. They're not consuming at the moment. Does China need to take that place and Germany?
Well, that's a very good point. But let's take the lesson of the previous cycle, which was driven by US consumers, and look at the mess in which we are now. So I'm very happy that the US consumer doesn't take the lead. If you look at global imports, the leading economies in terms of imports are emerging Asia, which means, of course, China, and the other emerging markets, US and Europe, come only second or third and fourth. So the new cycle, which will be much more driven by emerging markets, final, but also demand for capital goods. This is why Germany is doing so well. That is the characteristic of the new cycle. Not as powerful as the previous one, but hopefully more sustainable.
Eric Chaney from AXA, thank you so much for joining us.